God bless you. My name is Quinton Clay, and I'm proud to serve as the founder and senior pastor for Pillar of Fire Church here in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm coming to you absolutely excited to share something that's been on my heart, part of a devotional that I have gone through and really found some encouragement that I think many of us have been looking for and praying and asking God for. So as I share just these few moments, just 10 minutes with you today, I just want to share a small portion of scripture, Exodus, the 14th chapter, the 13th through the 16th verse. And if I were to title this, I would call this mini message, if you will, Be Still and Move On. Now, those two things on the surface and first reaction sound like complete opposites. Be still and move on. But all this will make sense and come together, and I think we'll relate to this on so many different levels. So Exodus, the 14th chapter, 13th through the 16th verse, just a little backstory. We know the story of Moses leading God's people, the Hebrew nation, the Israelites, from slavery in Egypt to the promised land. But we know this wasn't overnight, and it was absolutely a journey, just like the journey many of us go on. Moses finds himself learning about his call and his destiny in just really interesting circumstances, which by itself would be a whole nother video just to consume and break down based off of how we come about understanding who we are and what God really calls us to do. But in this particular text, Moses wrestles with who he is. He wrestles with the call, and God confirms and absolutely sanctions Moses's actions and steps forward in who God has called him to be, which was the liberator of his people from captivity in Egypt. Now, you get these 10 plagues, these miracles that God works through Moses, and the Pharaoh, at the culmination of all of this, says, okay, we're going to let you all go. And we're going to give you things you need for the journey, plus some. I don't want to see you again. Get out of my land. Get out of my face. This is over. This broken situation is over. Even Pharaoh by himself saw that the captivity of the Hebrew nation, the Israelites, was a broken situation altogether. So leaving a broken situation, you now have this nation of people, millions of people who are moving through the desert from, even though they were in slavery, they had stability, they had homes, they had possessions, they had a way of life that they were comfortable with. They had a routine that they were absolutely comfortable with, even though it was uncomfortable. Sometimes we find ourselves getting very closely acquainted and nestled up against our discomfort. And the same thing was the case with the Hebrew nation. So as they're moving through and they're traveling through the desert, Pharaoh changes his mind, and he's like, oh, wait a minute. No, I don't like the way this went down. I'm Pharaoh. You're not going to bully me. I have the mightiest nation, the mightiest army, endless resources. He chases down Moses and God's people. And now we get the chase, so to speak, up against the Red Sea. So they go through the desert. The people hear this army behind them, and fear starts to set in. They go from great joy to great fear. Sometimes we go through these moments in these corridors in our life where we have great joy and victory in different things that we've gone through, things that we've achieved, when it seems like our life is finally turning around, or things are finally coming together. Those relationships are breaking off. That job, seems to have come into alignment. The finances begin to come together on our behalf, and we can really start to see the creativity, the entrepreneurship, all the things that are in our heart start to change a bit, and we're giving ourselves the courage to believe that our life could be different, courage to believe that it could be more than what it's been for us in the past. And that courage sometimes has an army chasing it. That army behind the Hebrew nation was the Egyptian army. And as they heard the chariots and the horsemen, and they heard the cries of the army that came to kill and assassinate them, they turn on Moses. And this is where we find a very interesting crossroads, because Moses himself wasn't always a firm or clear believer. Sometimes we are called to do great things, but it doesn't mean that we are able to go through that journey with the absence of doubt or with the absence of fear. And then there's gasoline that can be thrown on that fire and make matters worse. And that's what happened for Moses. So now he has a terrible situation. He by himself is navigating, leading this people, led this nation through the desert with a sea in front of him and no way out. And now all of a sudden, you got an army behind you. You got soldiers behind you. And you're not an army yourself. It's not like you have the weapons to even fight the things that you're facing on your own. You're out there. You're completely vulnerable. And you got people watching. You got people judging. You got people complaining. They're complaining against Moses, and they end up, the Bible quotes them as saying, you know, Moses, you have us out to die in the desert. We could have been slaves back in Egypt and at least died that way with a level of comfort and stability, but you got us completely vulnerable to die out here. So now Moses is forced to answer the people, and I believe to even answer some of the fear and the doubt that was growing within himself. So here we go, Exodus, the 14th chapter, the 13th verse. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today." And this is what I want to tune into. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. So be still and move on. Now, let's think about this for a second. Okay, Moses, we're in the desert. We're moving forward. You got us out of Egypt, and there's a Red Sea in front of us. What do you mean, be still? I mean, where are we going? This army is behind us. They're cutting us off at the pass. You have a sea in front of us. What do you mean, be still? Well, Moses was speaking to quiet. He was speaking to all of the noise and the chatter that led to confusion, which started to heighten and make matters worse. It wasn't helpful that people were judging and second guessing him. It wasn't helpful that people all of a sudden, you know, started to break what used to be a unified walk forward, because, you know, you would hope that everybody who's with you is walking in the same direction as you. But man, not only are these tough situations that we're in, but it seems like even those that are supposed to be on the same page with us aren't even on the same page with one another or on the same page with us. And the worst thing that can happen is you're stuck in a situation and someone's going to call your attention to every flaw, every mistake, everything that they felt you could have done different. So Moses, in telling the people to be still, he was literally instructing them to be quiet because he was waiting for God to speak. The same God that brought forth the 10 plagues on Egypt, the same God that burnt the bush in front of him and revealed his glory to Moses and really shown himself, you know, to be someone that Moses can trust and rely on. That is the God we need to hear from when we are in our darkest hour and the darkest situations. So Moses commanded the people to be quiet, to be still, to calm your hearts, calm your minds, stop burning energy, stop chatting about it, stop talking about it. There's not another phone call or text message or post that you can put out there that's going to change the conditions that we're in. So it's time to be still. But then Moses goes clearly before the Lord to speak to the Lord on the people's behalf. Sometimes people can drive you to the point where you begin to doubt the voice of the Lord, and you end up going to God praying for something that God has already provided the answer to, even if that answer isn't completely clear and detailed for you to follow. So God speaks back to Moses and says to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on." So this is where I shared with you today, these two phrases, all moving in congruence, all moving in complement together. Be still and move on. The interesting piece about this is in the 15th verse, when God tells Moses to tell the people to move on, he hasn't yet parted the Red Sea. He hasn't yet made the way visible to the people, but he tells them to move on. But because they're not quiet, because they're not still, because they're chattering, because they got so much conversation and criticism, because they find themselves in a tailspin, and now instead of sticking to the plan and having courage and really trusting and anchoring down and believing in what God promised, they can't hear the Lord say, move on. They can't hear the Lord say, the path and the way has already been made. I would challenge you to think about this. In the 16th verse, that is where he commands Moses to raise his staff and stretch out his hand, and then the sea would divide so they can go across on dry land. That's in the 16th verse. But he told them to move on in the 15th verse. Today, I share with you all, and I challenge you all just to think about the stillness and the quiet that God is requiring of us in this time of uncertainty. Yeah, we've gone through changes and transitions. There's fear. There's very public failures that we risk. There's embarrassment. There's a lot of people that we might feel the need to answer to if things don't work out. But it's about being still, being quiet, and allowing God to speak to us and really show and demonstrate to us that that path is made, that that victory is made, that it's achievable, that the relationships and the resources are there, that the skills and the knowledge are within our possession, that everything we need, whether or not we see it and recognize it, God has provided it because he works things out all the way until the end. Sometimes we come across these storms in our life that aren't really about the challenges that are on the surface. It's really about the challenge that's within ourselves. The same thing can be said when we go to Mark, the 4th chapter, and we find the disciples in a boat on the sea in the middle of a storm with Jesus himself. And this is another moment where the word still is introduced to infer quietness. When the storm is tearing apart it seems like it's tearing apart the sea, and the waves and the water are coming across the ship. Jesus is asleep in peace and stillness. And they wake him up to tell him that the storm is going to overtake the boat. And yet he goes out and he speaks to the sea to be still, to be quiet. There's this noise and this distraction that we're all going to continue to revisit and experience in our lives. And that noise and that distraction is the real trial. It's not the army. It's not the sea. It's about us being patient. It's about us being faithful. It's about us holding firm to what God has promised us. And when we can be still, we can move on. There's another day ahead of you. There's a victory ahead of you. There are other bigger, badder opponents for us to fight. Our demise is not in this moment. Our demise and our destruction is not in the things behind us, nor in the things before us. But what we can do is destroy our opportunity to be who God has called us to be. I challenge us to really dig within ourselves and find that confidence. God works things out completely. He does not react to the changes and the variables and the new updates that we receive about our life and the challenges before us. God works things out completely to the end on our behalf. But if we're not still, if we're not quiet, we can't hear him confirm when it's time to move on. We can't hear him giving us the instruction that we need to take the first step. Let's not always keep ourselves in the position where he has to divide the sea for us to move forward. The power that was in the staff is also in our feet. If we would have just taken a step forward when God said move, we would have seen those conditions in that situation change. Be still and move on. I hope this reaches you in a time that you need it. I hope that you find yourself encouraged by this word, and we certainly look forward to the opportunity to come before you again and share more what the Lord is saying to us today. In the meantime, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and let's trust completely in our God. God bless.